Sure, yeah. Josh is going to pray for me.
Okay, great. You all pray with me. Father, I just want to thank you for Josh and lift him up before you. Just have your hand on him and bless him with the words to speak today. Help him remember everything he's prepared and help us to all be receptive to what he has to say. And just let this be a great time in your word where we can walk away learning more about you. I love you. I pray these things in your son's name.
Amen. Amen. Cool. So I actually want to start off a little bit with a confession to you guys. I know one of our big responsibilities as Christian leaders is to stay up to date with politics and the world, and to be completely honest, I don't pay attention to the news very often. In fact, most of my adult life, how I got the news was Daily Show, Colbert Report, and now that Colbert's on super late, I just don't really stay as up to date as I probably should. I'm sorry. But now the way that I get my news is actually through Facebook, newsfeed. You guys have that. It's actually been sort of a godsend because I can quickly get what I need. If you have been paying attention a little bit recently, there's been some pretty interesting stuff going on. Have you guys heard about the incident that's happened with United Airlines? Anybody? If you haven't, basically what's happened is any airline reserves the right, if you guys have probably seen, to ask and to actually tell someone that they have to wait for the next flight. It's something that they reserve the right to do. And in this situation, United had overbooked one of their planes. And so they had, just like a lot of times, they'll ask over the intercom, hey, is anyone willing to give up their seat? We'll give you a voucher, we'll give you money, whatever you need, we'll give you. And so they offer this and nobody volunteered. And so then they keep asking and nobody volunteers, to the point where they say, if no one volunteers, we have to ask one of you to step off the plane. And it gets to that point. And so they randomly select a passenger, and the passenger they happen to select happens to be a doctor. And they go to him and they say, hey, we need you to get off the plane. I'm sorry you've been randomly selected. We have this seat reserved for someone else. And he's like, no, I'm not leaving. Like, I have to be back home to help with the surgery. I cannot leave this plane. And so he stays there, and they continue to say, hey, you need to get off this plane, and he doesn't, and so they call security. And what happens is absolutely insane. If you watch the video, you look at the pictures, it turns into a massive fiasco. I mean, the guy's literally bloodied, bruised. There's people screaming on the planes. Kids are crying. It's total pandemonium, and we're just sitting there, and I'm like, this and my blood is boiling. I'm like, how can a United get away with this? Like, that's insane that they would drag this guy off the plane like that. And I'm watching this happen and I'm like, holy cow. And then I did something you should never do on Facebook. I went to the comments. The third comment down, I see this white guy in his 20s post something. He's probably a seminarian. And he posts this Bible verse and he says, actually, the guy is the one who's at fault. If only he would have submitted to authorities, this would not have happened. And I am livid at this point. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Do you have no sympathy for this guy? Did you not see his face? Did you not hear his story and what's going on in his life? How can you say that? And then all of a sudden I'm like, I'm preaching on that verse. Like, holy cow, this is weird. Like, I totally went through all this crazy emotional drama in my heart, and then I realized, this is like what I have to teach on this week. What do I do with this? How do I handle this? And so I decided, I got to take a step back, because clearly I'm really emotional about this, and this is clearly a big deal to us. And so I asked myself, well, what would I have done in this situation? If I were on this plane and I was asked to leave, what would I have done? And more importantly, what should we do as Christians if someone were to have told us that it is our responsibility to leave that seat? What should we do? And it's hard, because I think the reality, guys, is we live in this world right now where we have authority over us. And a lot of authority we don't like. A lot of authority that are making decisions that go against what we want. And yet we are here trying to figure out as Christians, how do we best respond? What are we supposed to do in these situations? And how should I look at these situations, and how should I comment on Facebook? And so it's really got me thinking, and it's really got me really analyzing this verse a little bit more personally than I expected, and honestly been convicted a lot. And I think this verse, which you guys all know, Romans 13, 1-7, we've all kind of had our ideas about it, and so I want to challenge us, because we're going to transition and read into here about what Paul has to say on this issue, because I think what he has to say is pretty profound, but it's very challenging. And I think that it's going to I'm going to say some things that are going to push you, that are going to be uncomfortable, you're not going to like, because I don't like them. And so I want to just encourage you to, as much as you can, as much as I'm trying to do, to keep an open mind and to listen to what Paul has to say here and really try to understand what are we supposed to do as Christian leaders with this idea of authority over us. And so if you have your Bibles, we're going to open up to Romans 13. I'm just going to read the first couple verses. And so the first verse says, "Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities. For there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted. And those who do so will bring judgment on themselves." Ouch. Like, do you hear the words that he's saying? Like, honestly, I think sometimes when I read the Bible, I'm like, yeah, that stung. Like, that sure doesn't feel good. But this is like a blunt object to the head. I mean, this is just like, if he's really saying what it sounds like he's saying, that's pretty intense. Because what it sounds like he's saying is he's saying that there is no authority except that which is established by God. Does that mean he's saying that our president, Donald Trump, was established by God? Does that mean that God established our manager that is a total jerk over me and does not represent Christ whatsoever? Does that mean that he established the dictators in the world? Like, what does this really mean? And so what we like to do, and I like to do as a seminarian, is I like to say, well, I know Bible stuff, right? I know all their verses. And so we think, well, are there other verses maybe in Scripture that I can look at to say, maybe that's not what Paul means? And so we go to Acts 5, right? We think about Peter. We think about Peter getting arrested by the Sanhedrin, and they're pulling in and they're saying, what you're doing is wrong, you need to stop. And Peter's like, no, because he's preaching the gospel. But they say, you need to stop. Why will you not stop? And he says, we're not going to stop. Because we must obey God and not human beings, right? We must obey God and not human beings. And so we hear that, we're like, boom, Paul, you must have been sipping the Kool-Aid or something, dude, because clearly Peter is the rock, man. Like, he's the one, he's the apostle. As much as you want to be an apostle, like, Peter, I'm with you. And then we go to Greek and we're like, well, if I look at the Greek here and I see the word that Paul uses for submit, right? He chose the word submit. Couldn't he have used the word obey in Greek instead, the stronger word? So he used the word submit. So really what he's saying is, you don't have to obey authorities. You just have to respect them. You just got to stand under them and believe that they have some sort of level of influence over you, right? And so we do this and we try to justify, we try to clarify, we try to sanctify, whatever, these verses so that they're a little more palatable for us because we don't like what they say. And I don't like what they say. But what if he's actually saying a little bit closer to what we think he's saying? What do we do with that? And the thing that's really interesting to me here, and I think part of the reason why this is hard for us, is because we have a different perspective on the world and our worldview of how God interacts with the world than Paul may have had. And the reason I say that is because Paul is this early Judeo-Christian worldview, right, where he believes that God ultimately has authority over everything. That God is above us, he's created everything. And in the midst of this world that he has complete and total authority over, we are standing here as humans. And in this position, the reality is that we have God as our authority, but above us, he's saying that there are powers, there are authority figures that he has established above us. Think about Paul for a second. He didn't get to choose the governing authorities. He didn't get to choose the emperors. Who chose it? God. God has established those authorities. But what's interesting here that we like to do is to say, well, he would have never thought that. But think about this. He's not distinguishing these authorities as good or bad, right? He's just saying God established them. And those authorities, they could be good, or they could be bad. But the reality is, Paul is saying they are above us. That we are under them because God has established them. And this is a hard thing for us to hear because honestly, I don't like authorities. And you see me limping, and part of the reason I am limping is another reason I don't like authorities. But the biggest place that I don't like authorities is on the basketball court. I'm just going to be honest with you guys. The moment I walk on the basketball court and I see those stripes of the ref, I immediately question, does this guy know what he's doing? Does this girl, did she read the handbook, or is she just kind of walking on? Because I play in a church league on Wednesdays with some dead some guys, so it's a little questionable if these refs are actually up to stuff. Just saying. But though I look at these guys, and then they make one bad call, I get angry. They make two bad calls, and I start to talk to them about their bad calls. They make 3 or 4, and all of a sudden it's like the national championship all over again, and I am livid to the point of getting kicked out potentially and getting technical fouls in a church league basketball league. And I see this and I'm like, I can't stand authorities. But I know deep down in me that if this league did not have referees, if I did not have these authorities over me, we would only have chaos. We would only have chaos because we'd be calling out fouls. I've been in this before in church leagues. I should just stop running church leagues. But we're in these leagues, and when you call your own foul, it's mass chaos. And what happens is people leave denominations because they can't stand the people that they're playing basketball with. It's insane. And so Paul is saying, don't think about this in the way of like, God is picking these authorities because they're good or bad. It's just a state of fact. God has established authorities to manage the chaos, to provide order. And if you think about the pagan worldview, it's more like gods are fighting amongst themselves and humanity is fighting amongst themselves. But particularly one of the biggest reasons this is hard for us as Western Christians is because we view things a little different. We are here as humanity, and how do we establish authority? It's by us. We choose who our powers are. We choose our authorities. We elect them. And in that process, what happens is we are choosing them so that they will serve our needs. We are the ones who establish authorities. And if you think about it logically, in our system, where is God? Where does God have to be in this? He's there somewhere. But where? We know he ultimately has authority over all of us, right? But we're the ones selecting authority. We're the ones picking the people who are in power. And what I want to do and challenge a little bit, because I think this is important to start here, because what if we take a little bit of Paul's perspective? What if we put on his Ray-Bans or whatever he would have worn and try to see through his eyes and see the world a little bit differently? What if in God's sovereignty, he actually establishes our authorities over us through our election process? What if in his sovereignty, even if it doesn't make sense to us in our Western worldview, he is the one still establishing these powers? This is important because as I think about one of the biggest issues with us in our society is what happens when we have this perspective of we pick the powers so they serve us. What we do, especially as Christians, is we say, well, the wrong person is just in power. We picked the wrong guy, right? In 4 years, it'll be better. Right now, we just got to kind of live with it, but we picked the wrong guy. We have this idea that we're the ones establishing. And when it's the wrong one, we can kind of slide back. But that's not the case. Paul is saying it doesn't matter whether they're good or bad. It doesn't matter who you think is establishing them because I have established them. I, as God, I have established these authorities. And Paul recognizes that. And if we recognize it, it changes our perspective a little bit about authorities, does it not? I mean, think about this. If God has chosen to put authorities above us, even if that's Donald Trump, does that not change the level of respect you should have for said authority? At least a little bit, I would hope. And so we're struggling with this, and honestly, guys, I have a hard time with this because I'm like, what do we do? What do we do now that we see this? I mean, how far does this go, right? How far do we have to obey these authorities that are put over us, especially ones that are not great authorities? And honestly, I'm just going to be real with you guys, it gets worse. So as much as you feel like this stinks so far, just buckle up because he keeps going. And he says in verse 3 through 5, he says, "For rulers hold no terror for those who do right, but for those who do wrong." He says, "Do you want to be free from the fear of the one in authority? Then do what is right and you will be commended. For the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid. For rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents for wrath to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. Therefore, it is necessary to submit to the authorities not only because of possible punishment, but also as a matter of conscience." And I hear this, and I read his words, and my first thought is like, I kind of don't like Paul right now, if I'm being real. Like, not only was he sipping the Kool-Aid, now he's not really helping me very much. Look at verse 3. He says, "For rulers hold no terror for those who do right, but do you want to be free from the fear of the one in authority?" Do you want to be free from the fear of this? What would you expect him to say? I would expect him to say, then obey them, right? Then obey the ones in authority if you want to be free of the fear. He doesn't say that. He says, do what is right. What does that mean? Think about that. What does that mean to do what is right? That's so not a practical application helping me hear out Paul. I'm like, what do? Think of the United situation. I mean, wasn't this guy in his right to actually stay in his seat? He paid for that ticket. He probably, of anyone else on the plane, had more valid of a reason to be able to stay on that plane. So why is it that he is the one that has to subject himself to the authority's decision? Why is it that he needs to be the one to do that? Why is he not in his right to remain in that seat? And we see this, and honestly, what's kind of been revealing in me is how much I, and probably a lot of you guys in our millennial Christian culture, are impacted by American culture. And what I say by that is I think we've grown up learning a lot of the values of our country, particularly life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, being the key values to what it means to be an American citizen. And so I'm told growing up that we are all granted the right to be happy and to pursue happiness, to do as we please so long as we don't harm others. And so what happens when someone harms us or decides to take away that happiness, it rubs us the wrong way. And so a lot of the decisions I think that we make, regardless of authorities, we make a lot of decisions that are first and foremost about our liberty, life, and the pursuit of happiness. We make a lot of decisions that are more about our comfort than about submitting to authority. And I say that because if you think about this, I know for me, a few examples that come up, but when I was in high school, or when you guys were in high school, how many times did your parents give you a curfew? And you're hanging out with your buddies, hanging out with your girlfriends, and 10 o'clock rolls around, and you're like, well, 10:15, 10:30, it's not that big a deal, right? It's not that big a deal. You get home then, it's not going to matter. Or you're in college, you're 19 years old, right? You're like, Canada has a rule that I can drink from there. You go overseas, I can drink there. All my friends, even a lot of my Christian friends are drinking. I'm not going to drink a lot, but isn't age just an arbitrary number? Like, why should I have to wait until I'm 21? Like, I'm pretty much there anyway, especially maturity-wise. I mean, how many times have you been struggling like this week with so much on your plate, with Passover, all these things you have to do for church and class, that you have a Greek assignment and you're like, I just can't get it done. And so you, in the morning, come in, you say, dude, can I just copy off of your answers? Because I just need to get this done. You know, ultimately you're going to do the work, and this is just this 1 week, it's not that big a deal. Or my favorite, the one that even driving here this afternoon, you go 7 miles an hour over the speed limit. Not 10, 7's that sweet spot, right? Whereas like, cops probably aren't going to pull you over for 7 miles an hour. There's people going faster, and so this is a pretty safe zone of going past the speed limit. And so it's like, we are choosing to do a lot of these things for our own personal liberties. Is Paul really saying that those things are wrong? Is that what he's saying here? Because if that's the case, I'm going to be honest, guys, this sucks. It really sucks. If he is saying that it is sinful, that I'm disobeying God when I choose to not submit to authority in these small things, I am in trouble. And it sounds like Paul is almost more of a Pharisee here, where I'm like, is he really saying you need to obey the letter of the law? I thought it was the heart of the law. But what if, as hard as this may sound, what if he's actually saying that? And what I want to see is in verse 5, he says something rather interesting. He says, it's necessary to submit to authorities not only because of possible punishment, but also as a matter of conscience. I mean, how many things do we avoid doing because we know we're afraid to get punished? I don't go 12 miles an hour over because I know if I do that, there's a likely chance I'm going to get in trouble, right? He says, don't just do things as a matter of avoiding punishment, but as a matter of conscience. What does he mean by that? I think the clearest thing I can think of is when I first started driving, because this is a just easy example. I don't know about you guys, but I was scared to death of being pulled over. I would drive 5 miles under the speed limit out of fear that I'm going to get caught. And going the speed limit, I would be constantly looking at the dash, making sure I'm at the right speed, shaking the whole while. But 3 weeks roll by, and I'm getting a little more comfortable. I'm getting a little tired of people zooming past me, flipping me off. I'm like, I'm just going the speed limit. And so I start to go a little faster. 6 weeks roll by, I start to go 5 miles under the speed limit. And then about 2 months into my license, I get a ticket for going 7 miles an hour over the speed limit. And there's a part of me that's so angry because I'm like, how can you give me a ticket? Like 7 miles an hour, isn't there like an unwritten rule that like clearly I'm not going that fast? That guy was going quicker. Why are you pulling me over? And what's happened is my conscience, which was so strong in the beginning, has now dissipated to the point where I don't think I'm in the wrong anymore. And it's the same way with sin. When we choose to do these small little things in rebellion, what happens is over time, the more little small things we do, the easier it becomes. And the bigger the things we're willing to do. And as hard as this may sound, I think what he's saying is, this is a matter of conscience. We need to go back to the reality that what we're doing is technically, realistically, against what the laws of the land say. And we need to recognize that our conscience is an important piece of us, not only for the level of shame that we experience when we get caught and how that feels, but we need to recognize here the importance of when we rebel against these small things, the more we do that, the more our respect for authority decreases. The more I choose to rebel in the small things, the more my respect for authority decreases. Think about that. When I was going 7 miles an hour, my first response wasn't, yeah, I was speeding. It was, no, why is this guy pulling me over? Are you kidding me? When I was dribbling down the court and I'm taking a crossover and the guy nails me in my knee to where I'm limping right now, my first thought was, ref, why did you not call that? What is wrong with you? Not that I was going out of control. It was that ref doesn't know what he's doing. Our conscience has got to the point where we don't respect authorities. And Paul is saying this is a huge issue. And so he's even saying we must submit to authorities because God has established them, even in the small things. And I feel like if I left it here, you guys would hate me. But doesn't that, just like let that sit for a second, doesn't that like suck? If this is true, it kind of sucks. Because this is a pretty strong word. And what do we do with that? Why would God want us to do this? Because it sounds like God's just this deity over us saying, you need to obey all these rules just to obey me. Is that really what he's saying? And so he continues in verses 6 and 7. And he says, this is also why you pay taxes. For the authorities are God's servants who give their full time to governing. Give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. And a lot of people, commentators, say that really the reason why Paul's writing all of this is actually because there was a group of Christians that were starting to join some of their Jewish brothers and sisters in revolt against the Roman government because of this tax situation. Because they were experiencing a burdensome thing that was limiting their liberties and their pursuit of happiness, essentially, if you want to look at it that way. And Paul says, no, don't rebel. Pay taxes. But he goes beyond that. He says, give them honor. Give them respect. He doesn't just say pay taxes and grumble about it. He says, give them what is due. There's almost echoes of what Jesus says, of render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Recognize their authority over you. Give them what they deserve. Even in those small things, give them what they deserve. And this is so hard for us, again, because of just that perspective of us wanting to recognize that we have liberties and pursuits of happiness that don't seem to be infringing on rights of other people. So why, especially if everyone else is doing it, should I have to do these things? Especially if it's hurting me. And this is where I think the heart of what he's saying is so strong that's just convicted the crap out of me, to be completely honest with you. What happened here is he's saying that we as Christians are driving our stakes of protest on the wrong hills. We are fighting for our personal rights, our liberties in a way that is not helpful. And the thing that comes to mind as I think about that is the story of the woman who was fired for her not being willing to sign marriage license agreements for same-sex couples. And the reason why it comes to mind is because I read in this verse what I think is Paul's heart of this passage. Back at verse 3 where he said, what do? We do what is right? But right after that, I kind of glanced over it. He says, you do what is right. Why? Why do we do what is right? You will be commended. You will be commended. I don't think what he's saying here is if you do what is right, you'll be blessed. I don't think what he's saying here, if you do what is right, you'll get what you want, ultimately. And I don't think he's saying, if you do what is right, you won't be persecuted. I think what he's saying is you'll be commended. right? People will look at you and they will see you in your actions and what you're doing, and they will have a heck of a lot more respect for you. Or in the words of Dr. Wenning, you'll gain a lot of chips in their favor, right? And so that's what he's saying. And I think back onto that lady that had this job working for the government, and she refused to sign these marriage agreements. And what Paul is saying is that each of us have the choice in this world to recognize our authority as established by God. And in that, we need to choose to say, what is the right thing for me to do in regards to that? And she chose. She said, I cannot faithfully make the decision to sign these contracts. And honestly, I commend her for that. For her to be able to say, yeah, in my faith, in my convictions, in what God is telling me, I cannot faithfully do this. I think that's amazing. But what happens after is where I think we are missing a huge piece of why Paul is bringing this up. Because what we do is we surround this lady, we drive our stakes of protest in the hill, and we say, injustice, right? This isn't fair. Look how you're treating her. She should not lose her job. Do you not care about our rights? Like, you're not allowing me to live my life as a Christian anymore. You're taking away my liberties. And what happens when we stand on that ground is the LGBTQ community and those on the outward-looking world look at us and they say, what a bunch of whiners. They care more about their rights than our rights. They care more about getting what they need than what about we need. Do you see the problem that Paul is saying here? When we drive our stakes of protest in the hill of our rights, our liberties, the onlooking world sees. And it's not good. It's hard for us to have a good witness when we are fighting so much for our own rights. What would have happened with this lady if she would have chosen instead in the Christian community? She says, yes, I can't faithfully do this, and so I'm going to accept that I'm going to be fired. And I'm going to leave. And when she hears her Christian brothers and coming up to her and saying, we need to fight this, this is insane. And she said, you know what? It does suck. But I want to respect the reality. This is the law of the land. These are my authorities. And I want to say, yeah, I can't faithfully complete the job that they are paying me for. And so I can't do it. What would that onlooking LGBTQ community think of that? Would she not gain a few chips to be able to have a little more leverage of loving them? Regardless of your views, would she not have more leverage to share who her true authority actually is? And I think of the greatest injustice of all, with this being Easter week. I mean, think of this, guys. I mean, Jesus lived this perfect life. His whole mission was to love God and love others. He focused on the outcast, focused on giving, serving, and giving everything of himself. And somehow, the worldly authorities decided that he needs to be arrested. In fact, he needs to be killed for what he's doing. And he gets put up on a cross. And as he's being nailed to the cross, what does he do? He says, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. His heart was always about the others. Do you not think that God, Jesus, in this position could have said, I'm above you as my authority. I can jump off this cross. I can smite all of you. In fact, you guys are wrong. I'm right. This is crazy. Why are you nailing God to the cross? Do you not think he could have done that? But his choice was, I'm going to submit to worldly authorities, whether they're right or wrong, because I know in doing so, God is going to be glorified. And in doing so, Jesus gained a few chips that has lasted almost 2,000 years, where people see this story and hear the story of his choice to submit to authorities for the sake of others. To say, you know what, I'm going to give up my rights in the hopes of gaining chips to share who the true authority actually is. And so as I think back on the United Airlines incident, and I'm like, what would I do? I hope that if this ever happens to me, I'm convicted enough from my own message that I would choose to get off the plane. I hope. But more so than that, I cannot imagine, guys, that there was not, in the passengers of 120 whatever people, that there wasn't one person in America that did not claim to know Jesus as their Savior. On that plane, that watched all of this happen. And all that they did was scream injustice for our rights as passengers. What would have happened if that person, seeing this happen, would have said, no, I volunteer. I will get off this plane. I will give up my seat so that person can stay. How much more chips would that person have to share his true authority, her true authority? And that is the heart of what Paul is saying here, is that we have to recognize that the authority in our lives, whether that be Donald Trump, our boss, our put over us by God, and that we are to submit to them because God put them there, even in the small things. And as we do that, the onlooking world will see our actions, and we will gain favor to be able to share who our true authority actually is. And I know for me, I struggle the most with this, recognizing that authority is put by God, and I have to step back and to see and to respect authority, even as I mock Donald Trump all the time. Is that maybe for me something that I need to look at? Are my words creating it harder for me to witness to the people around me? When I speed, when I choose to do things that are borderline not okay, when I have non-believers around me and they see me doing these things, are they not confused? Are there things that I'm doing that are more for my liberties and less about the sake of the liberties of others? So God says we must submit to authority because He put them there, even in the small things. And in doing so, we will have ground to share who our true authority is. Let's pray. Father God, I thank you so much that your word is convicting to me, and that you've given me opportunity both in my life this week, in the news, to really see in so many ways just how true this verse is. And Lord, I pray for us as Christian leaders here that you would help us just to love the people around us, to recognize that our submission to authorities is not just out of legalism, but is out of the hope that we would have the opportunity to share you as our true authority, Lord. Help us do that. Help us to drive the stakes of protest only in the ground for those that are suffering, not for our own suffering. In Jesus' name, amen.
Good job.
I got all these. I was going to pass these out, but we'll just avoid doing that.
Where did you even get this?
Oh, Amazon. Amazon's got everything. They're bipartisan.
Josh, do you want the feedback on here?